At 6:15 on the morning of November 7th, 1942, Corporal Thomas Lyons lay face down in the mud so wet and warm it clung to his cheek like a second skin. The jungle around Guadalcanal was still half asleep, wrapped in a heavy, breathless silence. But 15 feet from where Lyons lay, that silence had just been broken by a single sound. The last breaths of Staff Sergeant Robert Chun. The shot that killed Chun had come from nowhere. One crack. No echo. No flash. No second shot. Just the sudden, sickening realization that someone, somewhere, above or around them, had chosen who lived and who died that morning. Lyons was 23, young, but not new to fear. In the months since landing in the Pacific, 12 men in his platoon had already been taken by snipers. 12 men, each killed the exact same way. One shot, clean and invisible. No one ever saw where it came from. No one ever found the sniper afterward, and no one knew how to stop it. The Japanese had killed 73 Marines on Guadalcanal in just the last 2 weeks. Not through massed infantry attacks, not with explosives or artillery barrages, but one man at a time, one rifle shot at a time. Every engagement followed the same horrifying script. Marines push forward. A single Arasaka crack splits the air. A man drops. The jungle freezes. And the killer disappears. Marines called them ghosts. Men who fired once and then simply dissolved into the canopy, leaving nothing but fear behind. But on this morning, this exact minute, Lyons felt something he had never felt before after a sniper shot. A sense of direction. A pull. A suspicion. Chun had fallen. But something about the silence that followed felt different. Not empty. Not abandoned. Almost. Waiting. Lyons slowed his breathing. Slowed it until his own heartbeat became louder than the jungle. He replayed the last 12 seconds in his mind. The angle of Chun's fall. The timing of the crack. The tiny tremor in the canopy he thought he'd imagined. And then the realization hit him with absolute clarity. The sniper hadn't vanished. He was still there, exactly where he had fired from. For the next 30 minutes, that Japanese rifleman would remain locked in place, unable to retreat, unable to shift position, unable to do anything except wait for another Marine to present a target. It was a truth no one in Lyons's unit had understood before. A truth that would save thousands of American lives before the campaign ended. But in this moment, lying in the muck with death a few dozen feet away, Lyons didn't know he was about to change jungle warfare in the Pacific. He only knew one thing. If the sniper was still up there, he could be found. And if he could be found, he could be killed. Guadalcanal was supposed to be simple. On August 7th, 1942, the 1st Marine Division, 16,000 men, hardened by months of preparation, but untested in a true island campaign, landed with one clear objective: capture Henderson Field. The airfield was the key to controlling the Solomon Islands, a lifeline that could choke or free entire fronts of the Pacific War. And on paper, the operation seemed straightforward. Opposing them were roughly 11,000 Japanese defenders, fewer in number, scattered across dense terrain, and constantly under pressure from U.S. naval power offshore. The brass expected the fighting to last a few days, maybe a week. But Guadalcanal had other plans. Between the beach and Henderson Field stretched a jungle unlike anything Marines had trained for. Dense, wet, blind. A world of suffocating humidity, tangled roots, towering trees, and light so thin it seemed swallowed by the canopy. And hidden inside that labyrinth was a threat far deadlier than infantry assaults or artillery barrages. The Japanese sniper corps, not the cinematic, long-range, scoped marksmen Americans had read about in manuals. No, these were something else, something closer, something patient. From the first day, Marines began to fall in ways that didn't make sense. A rifleman walking through cane grass, a radio man kneeling to set up comms, a corpsman treating a wounded friend. One shot, one life gone. And the shooter? Nowhere. It didn't matter if the patrol returned minutes later or hours later, the sniper was gone every time. Marines saw only the result, a world where trees seemed to murder men, But the truth was more unsettling. The Japanese sniper corps had turned the jungle itself into a weapon, into a silent, suffocating killing field where every vine, every trunk, every shadow above eye level could hide death. Why American doctrine failed. Back home, American marksmen trained for distance. A good sniper shot from 600 yards, sometimes 800, with the perfect combination of rifle, optics, and environment. They fired clean, long shots, then immediately displaced to a new hide. Shoot, move, shoot again. That was the doctrine. That was the way. But the Pacific didn't care about doctrine. Japanese snipers operated at 100 yards or less, often 50. Close enough to see a Marine's expression when the bullet hit. Close enough to hear whispered conversations and clinking gear. And instead of retreating after firing, they did something no American manual even considered. They stayed. They didn't just stay. They tied themselves into the trees. The first strange signs. In the early weeks, Marine patrols found abandoned sniper nests tucked into palms, mahogany forks, vines woven like nets. But the details were strange. These positions always held the same odd clues. Lengths of rope, canvas straps, leather ties, knots secured around branches. At first, Marines assumed they were remnants of climbing, but the pattern repeated too consistently, too deliberately. These were not climbing aids. These were restraints. The snipers weren't climbing up to shoot. They were climbing up to stay. Investigations begin. Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Griffith, the operations officer for the 1st Marine Division, began piecing the puzzle together. He'd interviewed 47 Marines who survived sniper encounters by November 1942, cross-referencing accounts, trying to find consistency in the chaos. 17 men, all from different engagements, described the same chilling observation. After the initial shot, everything went dead silent. Duted. You will still duted. No rustling, no branches shifting, no retreating footsteps. Nothing. It was as if the jungle swallowed the shooter whole. But Griffith knew better. Men don't vanish. They move, or they stay. And if the sniper wasn't moving, then where was he? That's when Griffith met Colonel Merritt Edson, legendary commander of the 1st Marine Raider Battalion. Edson had fought Japanese snipers on Tulagi. His battalion lost 31 men in 3 days. And his after-action report included a line that stuck with Griffith. Enemy snipers demonstrate unusual patience. They will remain in position for extended periods without movement, even when Marine forces pass directly beneath their positions. I weigh. Extended periods. How extended? Hours? Days? And why? The Coast Watcher clue. Griffith requested intelligence from Australian Coast Watchers, clandestine observers hidden throughout the Solomons. Their reports, though fragmented, revealed something astonishing. Japanese sniper trainees climbed into the canopy at dawn and didn't come down until dusk. 12 hours, 14, even 16 hours. A man sitting 60 feet above the ground, unmoving for an entire day, was vulnerable, but not to bullets, to physics, heat exhaustion, muscle failure, falling asleep, passing out. A sniper who lost consciousness would plummet to his death, so the Japanese tied themselves in, ropes across the torso, canvas webbing around the legs, knots braced against thick branches. A simple safety measure that turned into a strategic liability, because once tied in, a sniper's world became fixed, immobile, locked in place, a ghost who could not run, a killer who could not escape. And though Marines didn't yet realize it, this flaw, this single, rigid choice in Japanese doctrine was about to become the crack that 1, 2, 3-year-old corporal from Oregon could pry open. The sniper problem didn't just haunt patrols on Guadalcanal, it shaped every hour the Marines spent on the island. Every movement, every step, every decision became a negotiation with unseen danger. Men walked through the jungle with their shoulders hunched, not from the weight of their packs, but from the expectation that the next sound they heard might be the crack that ended their life. After enough days, the silence itself became a sound, an oppressive pressure pushing down from the canopy. By late October 1942, Guadalcanal had turned into a battlefield of waiting. Marines waited for supplies, waited for reinforcements, waited for night raids, waited for the mosquito swarms to ease just enough to breathe. But more than anything, they waited for that single, sharp rifle crack that always came without warning. And each time it did, something inside the unit tightened. Men whispered less, watched the tree line more, flinched at shadows. And always, the same question hung over every patrol. Where are they shooting from? The truth, at that point, was that nobody knew. Not officers, not scouts, not even the veterans. The snipers seemed to be everywhere and nowhere, perched in the canopy like invisible predators. Marines returning from patrols often couldn't even remember the direction of the shot. The jungle distorted sound, trees swallowed echoes. The canopy created a labyrinth of vertical deception. The Japanese sniper corps was winning through fear, not firepower. And then there was Lyons, a different kind of Marine. Unlike most Marines in his platoon, Lyons had not grown up in a city or a suburb or a small town. He grew up in Oregon's timber country in the Cascades, where forests stretched farther than roads, and where a kid learned to read the woods the way others read textbooks. He wasn't a hunter. He was something different. He worked logging camps. From age 14 to 18, Lyons had spent every summer around men who lived their lives in the canopy, climbing, cutting, securing, reading, tree structure and weight, like second nature. He saw things other people didn't. Not because he was more observant, but because the forest was his first language. He knew how branches should bend when bearing weight. He knew what disturbed bark looked like hours after contact. He knew how humans move when suspended off the ground, slow, controlled, deliberate, unnatural. And he knew the single truth, that logging teaches better than anything else. The canopy has patterns, nature has geometry, and humans always break that geometry. But Lyons didn't yet realize that this childhood knowledge would decide life or death on Guadalcanal. The pressure builds. In the first week of November, sniper attacks intensified. Not in volume, but in precision. Marines stopped assuming the shots were random. The Japanese were choosing men who seemed critical to operations. Radiomen, squad leaders, corpsmen, machine gunners preparing positions. One bullet, one loss that could unravel a whole unit. Lyons had watched one of his best friends fall while setting up a communication line, another while crouching to treat a wounded rifleman. Each death pushed the same question deeper into his mind. Why don't we see them? Not once? Not ever? He replayed earlier patrols in his memory, looking for anything, any detail he might have overlooked. But everything blended into the same blur of vegetation and silence. And then came the day that changed everything. The minutes before Chun died, on the morning of November 7th, Lyons's squad was moving slowly through a dense patch of jungle near the Guadalcanal River. The sun wasn't fully up yet, and the canopy overhead was thick enough that the ground felt like late evening. Lyons remembered noticing how still the trees were. No wind, no birds, no rustling. Just that unnatural, heavy quiet that always seemed to precede a sniper shot. Chun raised his hand to signal a halt. Lyons knelt behind him. Someone whispered something about checking their flank, and then the Arisaka crack. Chun fell forward as if pushed by an invisible hand. Lyons dropped flat instantly, eyes wide but seeing nothing, just the same pattern he'd seen a dozen times. A shot, a body, silence. But this time wasn't identical. This time, in those 12 seconds after Chun fell, Lyons felt something. He couldn't describe it. It wasn't sound. It wasn't movement. It wasn't instinct. It was wrongness, a shred of visual noise, a disturbance he couldn't yet identify, a discomfort in the edges of his perception. And then it clicked. The sniper hadn't retreated. He was still in firing position, tied in, connecting the dots. The idea hit him with the force of revelation. Every detail from the past months snapped into place. The ropes, the empty nests, the stillness after the shot, the impossibility of a fast retreat from a 60-foot-high position, the Coast Watcher's reports of 12 16-hour canopy vigils. The Japanese weren't disappearing. They couldn't disappear. A man tied into a tree can't descend in seconds. A man who fires from a secured position can't shift his silhouette. A man locked into rope harnesses becomes not invisible but immobile. And immobility creates pattern. Lyons felt his pulse slow as he processed the implications. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about avoiding the sniper. He was thinking about finding him. If the sniper hadn't retreated, then the entire equation changed. The question was no longer, where did the shot come from? Where now? It became, where could the sniper still be? And, quote, that single shift from fear to geometry was the moment the balance of power on Guadalcanal began to tilt, and Lyons was the first Marine to realize it. The jungle above Lyons wasn't just a mess of branches and leaves, it was a ceiling of shadows stacked 60 feet high. Every inch of it looked identical. Every branch looked capable of hiding something. For months, Marines had stared into that canopy and seen nothing but green chaos. But this time, Lyons wasn't looking for chaos. He was looking for order. He pressed his body deeper into the mud, letting the ground absorb the sound of his breathing. The air was thick enough to feel, heavy with moisture and the smell of rotting vegetation. Sunlight filtered through in sharp, narrow beams that cut across leaves like white knives. But none of that mattered. Lyons wasn't looking for light. He was looking for shape, not movement, not camouflage, not the glint of a rifle barrel. All of those were illusions snipers controlled. But proportion? Proportion betrayed everyone. Growing up in Oregon's logging country had taught him something most Marines never even considered. Trees have patterns. Branches split and bend following weight, age, and weather. Their shapes follow a logic that repeats across the entire forest. But men always break that logic, even when still, even when camouflaged, even when they try to become part of the environment. Humans were vertical in a world built horizontally. Humans had symmetry where nature had irregularity. Humans carried mass in ratios that no branch, no vine, no trunk could fully imitate. That's what Lyons focused on. The grid. He didn't sweep the canopy randomly like most Marines. He divided it into a grid in visible quadrants he scanned one by one, left to right, top to bottom, slow, systematic, unemotional. Each square got the same attention. Each shadow the same scrutiny. 58 feet. That was the upper limit of what he could reasonably scan without shifting position. He knew the Japanese often chose high vantage points with split trunks or deep forks, places where branches could support the weight of a man tied in for hours. Lyons checked those first, but nothing stood out. Not yet. He kept scanning. The pattern breaks. Somewhere in the third quadrant his breath caught, not from fear, but from recognition. A dark mass rested in the fork of a large mahogany tree, half hidden by overlapping branches. At a glance, it could have been another knot of vegetation or a cluster of thick leaves. But something about it felt too regular, too vertical, too symmetrical, too structured. And he scanned it again, slower this time. The silhouette didn't match the chaos of the jungle. Where branches split in uneven angles, this shape held steady. Where leaves created random clumps, this mass formed a line. Where nature tangled, this object aligned. Then Lyons saw it, the thing logging had trained him to recognize faster than any Marine. Proportion. That shape wasn't foliage. It wasn't a branch cluster. It wasn't wind shadow. It was a human torso. Shoulders broad enough to register even through camouflage netting. A head tilted forward at an unnatural angle sighting down a rifle. Legs hanging, secured by straps he could now faintly make out against the trunk. Everything clicked into place. The sniper who killed Chun was still locked in his shooting position, understanding the advantage. For months, Marines had been scanning the ground, flanks, and brush everywhere, except the one place snipers committed themselves to, the canopy above them. But Lyons had done what nobody else had. He stopped looking for a man who moved. He started looking for one who couldn't. That was the difference. Japanese snipers tied themselves in to prevent falls during long vigils. But the same ropes that kept them safe also fixed their silhouette. Their shape, no matter how well camouflaged, could never fully blend with the natural geometry around them. Lyons had uncovered the first real, actionable pattern in the sniper war. And now he had to act on it, the setup for the shot. He adjusted his position without noise, inching his elbows into the mud for stability. His Springfield rifle rested lightly against his shoulder, iron sights rising toward the fork of the mahogany tree. The estimated distance was 70 yards, close enough that gravity and wind barely mattered. What mattered was not alerting the sniper. Men tied into trees didn't see what was above them. They watched the ground. They watched eye-level movement. They watched exposed flanks. But they didn't watch the canopy. That was Lyons's advantage, his one narrow, decisive edge. He took in a long breath, held it, let half of it out. The sniper was a shape, a proportion, no longer a ghost. And Lyons was about to end the pattern that had terrorized Marines for months. The moment Lyons identified the sniper, everything he understood about jungle warfare rearranged itself. It wasn't just a lucky sighting. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't fate finally choosing his side. It was a system revealing its flaw, a flaw nobody had recognized because every Marine had been trained to search the wrong direction. For months, American doctrine treated the jungle like a ground-level battlefield. Eyes scanned brush lines, shadows behind logs, root systems large enough to hide a crouched man. Marines checked ravines, deadfall clusters, and thick undergrowth everywhere a prone shooter might hide. But Japanese snipers hadn't been fighting on the ground at all. They were fighting in the vertical, and American training had not prepared any Marine for a sniper war fought 60 feet above eye level. Why nobody saw the pattern? Lyons broke it down in his head as he watched the sniper's silhouette through the iron sights. Sound distortion. In the Pacific jungle, sound didn't travel up or down in straight lines. The canopy trapped noise, warping direction and volume. A shot fired from above didn't feel like it came from above, it felt like it came from everywhere. Optics and light. Direct sunlight rarely reached the forest floor. Most firing points were bathed in broken, inconsistent lighting. Snipers tied themselves in shaded forks, where shadows blended into deeper shadows. Preconceived doctrine. Marines were taught, snipers shoot and move. They assumed empty nests meant retreat. They didn't consider a sniper might simply remain frozen, still tied in place. Camouflage culture. Japanese marksmen used netting woven with vines, leaves, and bark, locally sourced materials that perfectly matched each environment. Against the canopy background, the human form became a muted, irregular patch. Fear psychology. Every sniper kill eroded unit confidence. When men are terrified, they look down, not up. They search for cover, not threats. But Lyons wasn't thinking like a scared Marine. He was thinking like someone who had grown up knowing trees, knowing how they carried weight, how branches bent under pressure, how human mass distorted organic forms. And now, with the sniper tied into position, Lyons could finally see something no one else had. Stillness was the clue, not motion. That was the revelation. The geometry of a human being, even in camouflage, even with netting, even when half hidden behind foliage, a human body obeys proportions with mathematical consistency. A torso, roughly 7 heads tall, shoulders forming a 2-head width. A vertical axis nature rarely replicates. Limbs descending from a single horizontal line rather than random branch points. Branches fork irregularly. Leaves clump chaotically. Vines twist without repeating patterns. But a tied-in man, even motionless, retains a symmetry that nature does not. That's what Lyons had spotted: a vertical mass, too consistent, too organized, to be natural. Why the Japanese tied in? Lyons also understood the why better than most Marines ever could. The Coast Watcher reports had described vigils lasting 12 to 16 hours. For a man sitting motionless 60 feet up, tied-in restraints weren't a luxury, they were survival. Heat exhaustion could render a sniper unconscious. Cramps could make him slip. Nightfall could bring rainstorms that turned branches slick. A fall from that height meant certain death, so they tied themselves in. Canvas around the torso, webbing around the legs, counterweight straps lashed to the main trunk. They created safety harnesses, and those harnesses became prisons. Once tied in, they couldn't reposition without noise. They couldn't shift angles. They couldn't descend quickly. And after firing, they couldn't relocate. The Japanese doctrine prized endurance and patience. But endurance created immobility. Immobility created pattern. And pattern created vulnerability. For the first time, Lyons was seeing the entire tactical equation clearly. The moment before the shot, Lyons steadied his rifle. Every movement was deliberate, slow, controlled. He knew the sniper was watching the ground, expecting Marines to take cover behind fallen logs, to peer through brush, to check flanks and ravines. He expected Marines to behave like Marines. What he didn't expect, what no Japanese sniper expected, was a Marine studying the canopy with methodical precision. Lyons aligned the iron sights with the dark silhouette. His heart rate steadied, breathing slowed. 70 yards, slight elevation, minimal wind, M 1903, Springfield trajectory nearly flat at this distance. He'd practiced this shot countless times on rifle ranges, but never under these conditions, never with a friend dead at his side, never with his face pressed into mud, never with the knowledge that one mistake might bring another bullet down on his squad. But the moment held clarity, the geometry held, the pattern held, and so Lyons did what the sniper did not expect. He fired. The crack of the Springfield echoed upward, swallowed by the canopy. The dark mass above jerked sharply. For a split second, Lyons didn't know if he'd hit the sniper or just startled him. Then something slipped free. A long, narrow object tumbled through the leaves, clattering down branches before smashing into the undergrowth. The Arisaka rifle. The sniper's body didn't follow. It remained tied in place, motionless, lifeless, suspended 30 feet above the jungle floor. Lyons lowered his rifle. He had found the pattern, and now the entire Pacific campaign was about to change. The Springfield shot still echoed faintly in Lyons's ears when the jungle settled into silence again. Not the tense, breath-held silence that followed sniper fire, but a different kind, an emptiness after resolution. For the first time in months, the silence didn't feel like a threat. It felt like an answer. Lyons raised his head just enough to signal his squad. "Sniper down," he whispered. 45 degrees right, still in the tree, tied in. "If you want to..." The words didn't feel real. Snipers weren't supposed to be visible, let alone killed in seconds. But his squad trusted Lyons. They'd watched him track movements, others missed, read terrain, others ignored. 3 Marines emerged from cover, moving low, rifles up, spacing tight. They advanced cautiously toward the mahogany tree where Lyons had aimed his shot. The tree towered above them, its massive trunk disappearing into a lattice of branches that swallowed morning light. At first glance, they saw nothing, just leaves, shadows, the usual chaos of the canopy. Then one Marine pointed. There. 30 feet up, suspended in a fork of the tree, was the sniper's body, still tied in, still in the exact firing position he'd used to kill Chun. The contrast was chilling. A man built for patience, endurance, and silence, defeated by those same traits. The climb. Corporal James Russell, lean and wiry with the confidence of a born climber, slung his rifle, wrapped his arms around the trunk, and started ascending. The bark was slick from humidity. Ants crawled across his sleeves, but he climbed steadily. Lyons watched him go. Despite the kill, despite the sudden release of tension, his mind was still processing what had happened. He replayed the silhouette in his head, the geometry, the pattern. He knew this was no isolated event. He felt it in his bones. Every sniper they'd lost to had been fighting the same way. When Russell reached the fork, he steadied himself and examined the sniper's equipment. "Jesus," he muttered. "He's strapped in like a damn cargo load." Well, he called down his observations. 2 canvas straps around the torso. 1 strap binding both legs to the trunk. Standard issue. Japanese webbing. No improvisation. A half-empty water bottle beside the body. A small bag of rice, ration for an all-day vigil. Heavy camouflage netting woven with fresh vegetation. The implication was immediate. This sniper hadn't been waiting for minutes. He'd been in position for hours, maybe 4 hours, judging by the half-empty canteen. This wasn't ambush fire. It was endurance warfare. Russell cut the straps carefully, lowering the body with help from the Marines below. When the sniper finally reached the ground, they saw just how complete his concealment had been. Face paint, camouflage netting, vegetation tied directly into clothing seams, everything engineered to erase color and texture differences. Except one thing: proportion. Viewed from below, the human shape had betrayed him. Lyons explains the pattern. When Russell reached the ground, Lyons explained everything quietly, concisely, still half in shock from how quickly instinct had become certainty. He described the lack of movement after the shot, the silent canopy, the unnatural symmetry, the structured shape of the torso, the way the sniper's silhouette disrupted the randomness of foliage, the ropes that forced him to remain in position. It wasn't magic, it wasn't luck, it wasn't even talent. It was pattern recognition applied to the one place nobody had bothered to look. Russell listened, nodding slowly. Then his expression changed, sharpened. "This changes everything," he said. Because it did. From observation to doctrine. That afternoon, Russell reported the discovery to Lieutenant Colonel Griffith, the same officer who had been gathering stray hints for weeks but lacked the missing piece. He interviewed Lyons for 45 minutes, extracting every detail. The exact angle of the sniper, the grid scanning method, how Lyons distinguished human proportions from tree clusters, why the ropes created immobility, why the canopy, not the ground, held the truth, how long Lyons spent scanning, which canopy structures could support human weight. Griffith filled pages. Not poetic notes, not impressions, tactical geometry, the kind of information that could be taught, standardized, and applied. By the next evening, Griffith had created a 3-page tactical brief, clear, practical, transformative. It instructed Marine rifle companies to search the canopy, not the ground. Look for human proportions, not motion. Scan in a systematic grid pattern. Focus on tree forks and heavy branches. Assume snipers were immobile after firing. Assume they were tied in. Assume their silhouettes, not their camouflage, gave them away. Within 48 hours, the brief was distributed across the entire 1st Marine Division, and the jungle war on Guadalcanal shifted. One corporal's realization, born not from training, but from childhood summers in Oregon's forests, had become doctrine. Doctrine that would kill snipers. Doctrine that would save Marines. Doctrine that would outlive the man who discovered it. Griffith's 3-page tactical brief spread through the 1st Marine Division faster than any doctrine the men had seen since landing on Guadalcanal. It wasn't theory. It wasn't speculation. It wasn't a report written from the safety of a headquarters tent. It was a method pulled straight from combat, proven by a corporal face down in the mud, proven by a dead sniper still tied into a tree. Marines didn't question it. They embraced it, because for the first time since August, they finally had a way to fight back. The first test, Matanikau River. On November 9th, just 2 days after Lyons's discovery, 1st Battalion, 5th Marines encountered Japanese snipers near the Matanikau River. The engagement began the same way they always did. A single shot. A Marine fell. Silence swallowed the jungle. In the past, that silence meant paralysis. Men froze behind logs or dived into shallow depressions, waiting for a follow-up shot that never came. Sometimes they'd wait 10 minutes, sometimes more. Waiting had become survival. But this time, instead of huddling, the Marines stood up, not recklessly, not blindly, but with a new objective. Search the canopy, quadrant by quadrant. Sergeants barked short commands. Grid the tree line. We're gonna die. Scan high forks. B-act. Look for vertical mass. And, so it may be, proportions. Said. It was the first time Marines had ever systematically scanned above eye level after a sniper attack. And within 6 minutes, 4 sniper positions were identified. All 4 snipers were tied between 50 and 70 feet above the ground. All 4 were eliminated by rifle fire. None managed to fire a second shot. For the first time in the campaign, Japanese snipers were on the defensive. 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines Henderson Field. Later that same week, 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines, operating near Henderson Field, faced a similar attack. A sniper killed 2 Marines in rapid succession, and again, the unit enacted the brief. Canopy search. Grid pattern. Tree forks first, then heavy branches. Within a few minutes, Marines detected 2 more snipers tied into palm trees. Both had fired a single shot and remained in place exactly as Lyons had predicted. Both died before they could adjust or relocate. This time, word traveled down the line, quickly whispers exchanged in foxholes and mess lines. It works. One of this reader, it really works. 7. Marines began trusting the method instinctively. Fear didn't disappear, but it changed shape from helpless terror into manageable danger. The pattern holds across the island. As engagements continued across November, the same truths repeated. Snipers tied themselves in. Snipers fired one shot. Snipers stayed immobile. Snipers could be found using grid-based canopy searches. Snipers became vulnerable instead of invisible. The Japanese had built their doctrine around endurance and patience, but those same strengths now exposed them. Every tied-in sniper had effectively become a static target, and Marines were suddenly trained to identify static targets with precision. Japanese command notices the shift. By early December, Japanese commanders began noting unusually high sniper casualties in their reports. Intelligence captured after the Battle of Guadalcanal included explicit references to increased American capability to detect elevated firing positions. OE. They urged snipers to modify tactics to climb down after firing, to relocate more frequently. But orders mean little when doctrine and training say otherwise. Japanese snipers had been conditioned for years to tie in, remain motionless, and endure. They were masters of patience, not mobility. Retraining thousands of men during active combat was impossible. Any attempt to implement mobile sniping clashed directly with reality. Climbing up and down trees created noise. Movement exposed them to detection. Loose restraint ropes increased the risk of falling from 60-foot heights. Most jungle trees offered no safe descent route once fired upon. Some snipers attempted a compromise using longer ropes, tying themselves more loosely. Reports from later battles described snipers falling to their deaths when recoil jolted their position or when exhaustion made them slip. They traded invisibility for instability, and neither solution saved them. The numbers don't lie. By January 1943, the results were unmistakable. Before Lyons's discovery, 73 Marines killed by sniper fire in 2 weeks. After the new tactic spread, 16 Marines killed in an entire month, a 72% reduction. In a campaign where every foot of jungle felt like a gamble, those numbers meant everything. Marines still feared snipers. Fear was natural, but fear no longer paralyzed units. They had a method, they had doctrine, they had a way to fight back. And that method didn't stay confined to the 1st Marine Division. The 3-page brief traveled first to the 2nd Marine Division before their assault on Tarawa in 1943. Then to the 3rd Marine Division for Bougainville, and the 4th Marine Division for Roy Namur and Saipan. By mid-1944, every Marine Division in the Pacific used canopy-search as standard operating procedure. A discovery born from one man's instinct became a tactical foundation for tens of thousands of Marines. The ripple had begun. The canopy-search method didn't stay confined to Guadalcanal. It couldn't. It worked too well, too reliably, too quickly. The 1st Marine Division carried the brief forward as they left the island. And everywhere it went, the pattern repeated. Find the elevated firing point. Identify proportions. Grid the canopy. Neutralize the sniper. When the 2nd Marine Division prepared for the invasion of Tarawa in November 1943, they received copies of Griffith's brief. It wasn't just treated as useful information, it became required reading. Tarawa would be a different battlefield, a flat coral atoll with few trees. But the lessons from Guadalcanal shaped their expectations. The Japanese might adapt, might dig deeper, might abandon tree positions entirely. That shift in mindset helped Marines anticipate the change in enemy tactics long before they stepped onto the island's bloody beaches. At Bougainville, the 3rd Marine Division implemented the method with immediate success. The dense jungle there mirrored Guadalcanal's terrain, and Japanese snipers again relied on elevated hides. But now, instead of losing men for weeks before identifying patterns, Marines spotted tied-in snipers within minutes. What had once been a phantom menace had become a solvable problem. The 4th Marine Division repeated the cycle at Roy Namur and Saipan. The tactic was so effective that by mid-1944, canopy scanning was no longer seen as new. It became standard operating doctrine, taught automatically to rifle companies the moment they landed on any island with thick vegetation. The Army noticed, too. The 32nd Infantry Division, operating in New Guinea's brutal jungles, observed Marine successes and adopted canopy searches into their own sniper countermeasures. And when the U.S. Army published the Field Manual for Jungle Warfare in May 1944, it included a new section, Detecting Tree-Based Snipers. The manual didn't mention lions by name, but the principle was there, his principle. The geometry he discovered in 12 seconds of mud and terror now guided tens of thousands of soldiers across the Pacific. The Japanese struggle to adapt. Japanese commanders understood something had changed. Their after-action reports in late 1943 and early 1944 showed rising panic. They noted increased sniper casualties, decreased survivability of elevated hides, and a rapid escalation in American countermeasures. To adapt, they experimented. Some snipers abandoned trees entirely, shifting to ground-level hides. But on the ground, they lost visibility and range. Many were overrun or suppressed before they could fire more than once. Others tied themselves in loosely, hoping for small adjustments after firing. But loose ropes meant danger. Several reports from Peleliu mentioned snipers falling to their deaths after heat exhaustion or recoil jolts. The most promising adaptation came too late to matter strategically. Two-man sniper teams in the Philippines in early 1945. One man tied in position, one spotter on the ground providing covering fire. It helped, but only marginally. By 1945, American forces dominated the Pacific with overwhelming firepower, air superiority, and logistical strength. Even the best tactical adjustments couldn't shift the tide of war. The man behind the method. And what of Lyons? His discovery traveled farther and lasted longer than he ever would. After Guadalcanal, he fought at Cape Gloucester in December 1943. He earned his sergeant stripes. Then he landed at Peleliu in September 1944, one of the most brutal battles of the war. On September 18, 1944, Japanese artillery struck near Bloody Nose Ridge, and Lyons was killed. He was 25 years old. He never saw how far his insight spread, never saw the doctrine it became, never saw how many Marines survived because of him. The Marine Corps never officially credited him during the war. Griffith's tactical brief cited observations from combat veterans without names, but Lyons's father knew. Back in Oregon, he kept a copy of the brief. He showed it to logging crews, explaining how his son had taken a skill from the forest canopy and used it to fight an enemy hidden in another canopy half a world away. The loggers understood instantly. They knew the weight of branches, the balance of trunks, the danger of heights. They knew what it meant to read a forest and see what others couldn't. Recognition at last. In 2008, the Marine Corps History Division published a comprehensive study of small unit tactics on Guadalcanal. For the first time, it named Corporal Thomas Lyons as the Marine who discovered the canopy-search method. In 2012, 1st Marine Division dedicated a training facility at Camp Pendleton, the Lyons Combat Skill Center, a place where modern scout snipers still learn the same fundamental truth Lyons realized beneath a mahogany tree in 1942. Immobile enemies create detectable patterns, and patterns can be found. Guadalcanal claimed more than 7,000 American lives between August 1942 and February 1943. It was a campaign carved into the memory of every Marine who walked its beaches, an operation historians still debate. Was the island strategically essential, or was it an overcommitment to a symbolic objective? For the men on the ground, none of that mattered. They weren't writing history. They were trying to survive it. To them, every tactic that saved even a single life mattered absolutely. And Lyons's discovery did far more than that. It did not end the sniper threat. Japanese marksmen kept killing Marines across the Pacific on Cape Gloucester, on Peleliu, on Okinawa. But after November 7, 1942, the equation had changed. Snipers were no longer phantoms, no longer invincible shadows slipping through branches, no longer figures Marines feared but could not understand. They became detectable, predictable, vulnerable. One corporal, lying on his stomach in the mud, had taken the terror that ruled every patrol and turned it into a solvable geometric problem. And that insight rippled outward through 6 Marine divisions, across 27 months of combat, and into decades of military doctrine. When Scout Sniper instructors at Camp Pendleton teach canopy search today, whether using iron sights or thermal optics, the principle remains exactly the same. Search systematically. Look for patterns. Human proportions never lie. Thomas Lyons never received official credit during the war. No medal, no citation, no speech. His contribution was absorbed into institutional knowledge, passed quietly from one Marine to the next, but his family remembered, the loggers back home remembered, and, finally, the Corps remembered. In 2012, when the 1st Marine Division dedicated the Lyons Combat Skill Center, they wrote a single line on the plaque. In memory of Sergeant Thomas Lyons, whose tactical innovation saved countless Marine lives in the Pacific Theater. A young man's observation born from childhood summers in Oregon, forged in the mud of Guadalcanal, became a teaching that outlived him by more than 70 years. His legacy is simple and powerful and universal. Patterns exist, even in chaos, even in fear, even in war. And if you can learn to see them, you can survive them.